Film plate. A warm plate stopped in front of a man everyone had already judged. He sat in the rain with nothing left but his name, and even that had been taken. What did this woman remember that the whole town forgot? First thing Clara noticed was not the rain. It was the way the man sat, as if he had forgotten he was allowed to move. He was on the far bench near the walking path, half hidden by the low branches of an old tree at the edge of the park. His suit was dark and soaked through at the shoulders. Water ran off the ends of his sleeves and gathered at his cuffs, but he did not brush it away. Feel my. His hands were folded between his knees. His head was lowered. His shoes were planted neatly on the wet pavement, as if some part of him still remembered dignity, even after the rest of him had given up. Fear. Clara Whitmore stood under the small awning of her food cart, with a stack of empty containers in one hand and a dish towel in the other. It was late afternoon, kind of cold Atlanta rain that did not fall hard enough to chase everyone home at once, but steady enough to make the whole park look tired. The lunch crowd had passed hours ago. Her school rush had been thin because of the weather. 2 pans of rice were nearly gone, the sweet tea container was half empty, and the fryer had been turned down low enough that the oil only murmured. Behind her, Fala sat on a folding stool inside the cart, one knee tucked under her, a textbook balanced against the prep counter. She had been quiet for almost an hour. Usually meant she was either studying hard or trying not to ask Clara about bills. Clara preferred the first version. She wiped the counter, checked the cash box, then looked toward the park again. The man was still there. People passed him, the way people pass things they do not want to claim. A jogger slowed near the puddles and went around. A mother with a stroller pulled the plastic cover tighter and glanced once at the bench before turning her face away. A boy in a hoodie hurried past with his backpack over his head. The man did not look at any of them, fed plenty of people who were down to their last $5. She knew the difference between hunger and shame. Hunger looked at the cart. Shame looked at the ground. This man had not looked at her cart once. "Mom," Tessa said from behind her. "You're letting the cold in." Clara realized she had lifted the side flap without meaning to. Rain had blown in across the metal counter. "Sorry, baby." She lowered it halfway, but she kept looking. It was something about the angle of his face, the line of his brow, the way he held his shoulders even while everything else had collapsed inward. She knew him, not from the park, not from the neighborhood, from the kind of life she had now. People knew her by what she served, and whether she had enough hot sauce left. She knew him from another room, another season, a hallway with bright floors and school posters on the walls. She knew him from a time was small enough to fall asleep in a chair while Clara worked double shifts and pretended not to be afraid. Clara set the towel down. "Tessa," she said, "watch the rice a minute." Tessa looked up. "We closing?" "Not yet. Where are you going?" Clara did not answer right away. The man lifted his head just enough for the park light to catch his face. And then she knew, Nathaniel Brooks, for a moment. Clara forgot the rain, the cart, the half-counted cash, even the ache in her feet. She saw him as he had been years earlier, standing in a school hallway with a folder under one arm, speaking to frightened parents in a voice that never made them feel small. He had been the kind of man people made room for without being asked. Not loud, not soft, just steady. He sat on a wet bench, like someone had taken his name from him and left the body behind. Clara looked back at the cart. A shallow pan of chicken rested under the warmer. Not enough for a rush, enough for one good plate. He scooped rice into a container, added beans, then 2 pieces of chicken from the corner where the skin had stayed crisp. She closed the lid, opened it again, added a little more rice, then shut it firmly. Tessa watched her. "Is he somebody you know?" Clara reached for a napkin and tucked it under the container. "I think so. You think so?" Clara did not have a clean answer for that. She only had the memory of a white envelope in her kitchen drawer, the old tuition receipt folded along the same crease. So many times the paper had gone soft. She had never known who had made that payment. Not really. She had guessed. She had prayed over it. He had blamed luck because Luck was easier to accept than kindness with no name attached. But now, looking at the man on the bench, she felt that old question stir. She stepped out from under the awning. The rain hit her headscarf first, then her shoulders, then the front of her white apron. She carried the container close to her chest to keep it dry. Behind her, the cart's small yellow light glowed against the gray afternoon. Nathaniel did not look up as she crossed the path. Up close, he looked older than she remembered, but not in the simple way of years passing. His face had the hollowed look people got when sleep stopped doing its job. His beard had grown uneven along his jaw. There were drops of water clinging to his eyelashes. His hands were still folded, but the fingers were clenched so tightly the knuckles showed pale. Clara stopped a few feet from him. "Mr. Brooks?" He raised his eyes. There was no recognition in them. That hurt more than Clara expected. Not because she needed him to remember her. She had not been anyone important back then. Just a woman in a cafeteria uniform, counting hours, counting dollars, counting how many times she could tell her daughter everything would be fine before the words started sounding false. Still, and hearing her own voice say his name and seeing nothing come back to him made the years between them feel wider. He looked at the container first, then at her face. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was low and careful. It had not been used much. "Do I know you?" Clara could have told him. She could have said Tessa's name. She could have said the school. Hindu was not. She could have said there was a receipt in her house she had kept for years because it was proof that one door had opened when every other door was closing. But something in his expression stopped her. He was bracing himself for kindness, for explanation, for pity, for the little story people asked from a broken person before deciding how much help he deserved. Clara knew that look too, so she did not give him a story. She only held out the food. "That extra," she said. His eyes moved to the container again. "I don't have any cash on me. I didn't ask for any." He looked away. "You should sell it." "I did," Clara said gently. All day, the corner of his mouth moved, quite a smile. More like his face had remembered the shape, and then thought better of it. She sat the container beside him on the bench, close enough that he could reach it without having to accept it from her hands. Mattered. Some people could take help if you did not make them perform gratitude for it. The rain tapped against the plastic lid. For a while, neither of them spoke. Clara stood there with her arms folded against the cold, letting him not touch the food. He stared at it as if it were something dangerous, as if opening it would mean admitting he needed it, as if needing it was worse than being wet, worse than being hungry, found, worse than being seen sitting alone in a park by a woman who knew his name. Back at the cart, Tessa had shifted closer to the open side, her textbook forgotten in her lap. Clara felt her daughter watching. He also felt the day pressing on her. The rice needed covering. The cash needed counting. The fryer needed shutting down. There were cups to stack, pans to wash, and tomorrow's chicken to think about before she went to sleep. He stayed one more second, then another. Nathaniel's hand moved at last, not toward the container, toward his tie. He touched the knot, loosened it a little, then let his hand fall again. "You said my name," he said. "Yes, sir." He turned his face toward her. His eyes were tired, but sharper now, as though some old habit had woken up beneath the ruin. "How do you know my name?" Clara's fingers tightened around the edge of her apron. A sound. This was the place where she could have opened the past. She could have reached into the old drawer in her mind and pulled out Tessa at 5 years old, asleep in a plastic chair. She could have told him about the bill she could not pay, the office she had been afraid to walk into, the receipt that appeared with a zero balance and no explanation that made sense. But if she said all that now, he would know. She was not simply feeding a man in the rain. He would know she was repaying something. And from the way he sat, Clara understood that repayment might feel like another kind of debt, though she gave him only what he could hold. "You worked at my daughter's school," she said. His gaze dropped, and something passed through his face so quickly she almost missed it. Pain first, then shame, then a careful blankness. "Anymore," he said. The words came out flat, but Clara heard what sat underneath them. Not anger, not complaint. Something worse. The sound of a man who had repeated that truth to himself until it no longer cut cleanly, feel Clarist. Only pressed, I figured, Clara said. He looked at her then, perhaps expecting a question. Perhaps expecting the look people gave when they had heard a name before, and were trying to remember the scandal attached to it. Clara gave him neither. She glanced at the container. Chicken's better hot. That almost got a real expression from him. His eyes softened for half a breath. You always tell strangers what to do? For sitting in the rain with hot food getting cold, Clara said. The answer came out before she could make it polite. That was how she spoke when she was tired. Not sharp, exactly. Just plain. Nathaniel looked at the container again. Still, he did not open it. Aunt Clara understood the limit. She had brought the food. He would have to decide whether to receive it. Anything more would be taking something from him, even if she meant it kindly. She stepped back. I'll be over there. Till I close. He did not answer. Clara walked back to the cart, feeling the rain soak through the shoulders of her shirt beneath the apron. Tessa watched her come in, eyes full of questions she was trying hard not to ask. Who is he? Tessa said quietly. Clara picked up the towel and wiped her hands, though they were clean. Someone who used to run your school, but turned toward the park. He looks sick. He looks tired. That's not the same? No, Clara said. Not always. Tessa was quiet a moment. Then she looked at the food still sitting unopened beside Nathaniel. He didn't take it. I didn't ask him to. Clara went back to work, because work was the one thing that had never waited for her feelings to settle. She covered the rice, turned off the warmer, into the cash twice, and got 2 different numbers, then put the bills back and decided the third count could wait. A young boy from the apartment complex came by with 3 damp dollar bills. Clara gave him a small plate with extra rice, because she knew he would stretch it into dinner. All the while, she kept glancing toward the bench. Nathaniel did not move. The container sat beside him. The rain thinned to a mist, thickened again. The path emptied. Cars hissed on the road beyond the trees. The park lights clicked on one by one, turning puddles into dull gold. Finally, Nathaniel reached for the container. He did not open it. He only placed one hand on top of the lid. Clara felt something in her chest loosen. It was not much. It was hardly anything. But sometimes hardly anything was the first sign a person had not disappeared completely. Tessa closed her textbook and slid it into her backpack. Mom? You know him more than you're saying. Clara looked at her daughter, 17 years old, too careful with her own wants, too good at reading silence. Then Clara had tried to raise her with honesty, but there were some kinds of truth that needed the right hour. I know he was kind once, Clara said. Tessa waited for more. That's enough for today. Finished closing, after the rain had turned the pavement dark and shiny. Clara locked the cash box, tied the trash bag, and wiped down the counter one last time. When she looked back, Nathaniel was still on the bench, container now resting on his knees. He had opened it. He had not eaten much, maybe only a bite or two. But the lid was open, and steam, faint now, curled into the cold air. Clara stepped down from the cart again. Bring another plate. She did not bring napkins or tea or questions. She only walked close enough for him to know she was there. Nathaniel looked up before she spoke. For the first time, he truly seemed to see her, remember her, not yet, but see her. His face remained guarded. His shoulders were still bent. Shame had not left him. It had only made room for confusion. He looked from Clara to the food, then back again. Why? He asked, his voice rough with disuse. Do you keep coming back? Clara did not answer him right away. She could have. There were answers small enough to fit on a wet bench. Because you look hungry. Because I remember you. Because once, when I did not know how I was going to keep my little girl in school, somebody made the impossible go quiet. But none of those answers felt safe in the rain. So she only stood there a moment, letting the question settle between them, and then said, because food gets cold if nobody brings it. Nathaniel looked at her, as if he knew there was more behind the words. But he was too tired to reach for it. He closed the container, Not because he was finished, but because receiving even that much kindness seemed to cost him something. The next afternoon, Clara brought him another plate. The rain had stopped by then, but the park still held the dampness of it. Water sat in the cracks of the walking path. The bench looked darker than the others, as if it had remembered him overnight. Nathaniel was there again, in the same place, views, with the same careful posture that tried to look composed and only made him seem more broken. This time, he accepted the food with both hands. He did not say thank you until Clara had already turned to leave. "Thank you," he said. He looked back. "You're welcome." That was all. For several days, their conversations were made of small things. The weather, whether the rice had enough salt, whether the park got crowded after school, Nathaniel answered in short, careful sentences. Clara did not push. She had learned, over the years, that a person who had been humiliated did not need someone prying open the wound just to prove they cared. At the cart, Fessa watched more than she asked. She noticed when her mother packed one plate before closing, always with the same care. She noticed when Clara checked the park before counting the cash. She noticed that the man on the bench never came to the cart, never asked for more, never waved Clara over, and somehow still became part of their evening. One late afternoon, the thin crowd had gone, and the air smelled of warm oil and wet leaves. Nathaniel came closer to the cart. He stopped a few feet away from the side window, as if an invisible line had been drawn there. Clara was wiping down the counter. "You don't have to stand out there," she said. "Rain's coming back." He looked toward the sky. "I won't be long." Tessa, sitting inside with her notebook open, looked up, feel her daughter listening. Nathaniel's eyes moved briefly to the girl, then away. "How old is she?" he asked. 17. He nodded, and something in his face changed. Not softness exactly. Recognition of an age, a doorway, a season in a young person's life that mattered. "Senior year? Almost done. Good student?" Clara gave a tired little smile. "Too good. Worries like she's already paying rent." Tessa lowered her eyes to her notebook, pretending not to hear. Nathaniel looked at the ground. "Some children learn the weight of money before they learn what they want." The sentence was quiet, but it did not sound casual. It sounded like something he had carried for a long time. Clara stopped wiping. "You worked with a lot of kids like that," she said. He did not answer at once. A car passed on the road beyond the park, tears passing through the damp street. From somewhere behind the cart came the faint clatter of a pan settling as it cooled. "I tried to," he said. The words were simple. The past tense was not. Folded the towel and laid it beside the register. "Mr. Brooks, what happened?" He looked at her then. His face closed so gently it was almost polite. "You already heard." "No," Clara said. "I heard people talk." The same thing. For the first time since she had found him, irritation crossed his face. It was small, but it was alive. People talk enough to make it the same. Clara did not flinch. "Not to me." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer to the cart, not inside its warmth, but close enough that his voice would not carry to the whole park. "There was a student fund," he said. "Scholarships, emergency uniforms, testing fees, things families needed when they didn't qualify for help but still couldn't pay out of pocket." Clara's hand tightened near the towel. She kept her face still. Nathaniel went on. "He went missing." Or that was the way they said it. "The board said the records had my approval on them. Transfers, signatures, my name on pages I should have read more carefully." He looked past Clara, toward the park, was asked to step aside while they reviewed it. "Then, I was asked not to come back." The words were plain. That made them worse. There was no drama in the way he told it. No attempt to make himself sound noble, anger sharp enough to protect him. Just a man laying pieces of his own ruin on a metal counter beside a jar of plastic forks. Tessa had stopped pretending to study. Clara noticed and gave her a look soft enough not to scold, firm enough to send her attention back down. Tessa obeyed, but her pencil did not move. "What did you say?" Clara asked. Nathaniel gave a faint breath that was almost a laugh. "What does a man say when every paper on the table has his name on it? That you didn't do it." His eyes moved back to hers. You believe that? Clara almost said yes. She wanted to. Center of her had wanted to. Since the first night. Since she watched him touch the lid of that food container like it might accuse him too. But wanting something to be true was not the same as knowing it. Clara had lived too long on tight money and thin margins to confuse hope with proof. I believe, she said carefully, that you don't sound like a man who stole from children. Nathaniel looked away. The sentence landed harder than she expected. His mouth tightened, and for a moment, the careful blankness broke. Under it was a kind of hurt Clara recognized, because it did not ask to be comforted. It only wanted not to be made worse. My son didn't call, he said. Clara stayed quiet. He seemed surprised by his own words, as if he had not meant to open that door. Aaron, he added, unnecessarily. He has a wife, a good job, life that doesn't have room for his father's name, in an ugly story. There it was. Not just the job, not just the school, the deeper loss. Clara had thought shame was sitting with him on that bench. He understood. It had brought family with it. He may not know what to say, she said. Nathaniel's expression, Chen, did not change. He knew how not to call. The words were not bitter. That was what made them heavy. Bitterness had heat. This had gone cold. Clara turned and picked up a clean container. Her hands needed a task. She spooned rice into it, added the last of the beans, then closed it without adding chicken. He opened it again and added a piece anyway. You keep anything? She asked. Nathaniel blinked. What? From the school. Records, copies, old notes, anything with dates on it. His shoulders shifted. Why? Because people who do wrong usually count on tired people, staying tired. He looked at her, and now the guard in his face was different. Not defensive, wary of hope. I'm not asking you to fight tonight, Clara said. Asking if you kept anything. For a while, he did not answer. Then, slowly he said, I have notebooks. Clara waited. Attendance notes, parent letters, copies of requests, pep things, because I didn't trust computer systems to remember children the way paper does. He looked embarrassed by that, as if it made him old-fashioned. Clara did not smile. Where are they? At my place. Phrase sounded thin. Clara did not ask what kind of place. She had seen enough already. Bring them tomorrow. Nathaniel looked down at his hands. Miss Clara. Just Clara. He nodded once. The correction seemed to make the room between them more human. Clara, he said, if I open those boxes, I open everything I know. No, he said quietly. You don't. She accepted that. There were pains she did not know, then. There were humiliations a person could not understand just because they were kind. But there were also things she did know. He knew what it was like to sit across from an office desk and hear that your child's chance depended on a number you did not have. She knew what it was like to keep a receipt because a zero balance looked like mercy. She knew that names mattered. And she knew that if a decent man had been buried under paper, then paper might be the only shovel they had. Then don't bring them for me, she said, for the children whose names are in them. That reached him. Answer. He did not answer. He only took the container she had packed and held it against his chest as if it were heavier than food. The next day, he came before the rain. He carried a worn canvas bag in one hand. The bag sagged from the weight inside. Clara saw him from the cart window and felt her stomach tighten, not with fear exactly, with the sense that something had begun and could not be politely stopped. Tessa saw him too. He brought something, she said. Clara nodded. Go ahead and finish that worksheet, baby. You're staring, Devaught. Tess looked back down, but not before catching the seriousness in her mother's face. Nathaniel set the canvas bag on the small table near the side of the cart, the one where regulars sometimes stood to eat when the weather was good. Today, no one else was there. The park was damp and quiet. The lunch rush had not started. Clara opened the bag. Inside were notebooks with softened corners, folders held together with rubber bands, folders held together with old letters. Nothing about them looked powerful. They looked like the kind of things people threw away when they wanted a room to look clean. Nathaniel kept one hand on the bag, not stopping her, but not letting go either. I shouldn't have brought them, he said. Yes, you should have. You don't know what you're looking at. No, Clara said. You someone who might. Marcus Reed, a little after the lunch crowd thinned, walking with his usual measured pace and his usual exact change already folded in his hand. He was a lean man with silver hair, framed glasses, and a habit of looking mildly disappointed before anyone had done anything wrong. "Tea's too sweet today?" Clara asked before he could speak. "It was too sweet last week," Marcus said. "Today, I haven't judged it yet." She handed him his usual plate. He counted out the money to the penny and slid it toward her. Then his eyes moved to the folders on the side table. "I hope those aren't tax forms," he said. "People who bring tax forms to lunch deserve cold chicken." Clara leaned closer. "I need you to look at something." Marcus paused with his fork halfway to the plate. "I'm retired. I know. Retired means I don't look at things. You look at my menu prices every Tuesday like you're auditing the Treasury. That's different. Your tea pricing is a public concern." Clara did not laugh. Marcus noticed. His face changed by only a fraction, but Clara saw the shift. Customer fell away, and something older, sharper, came forward. "What kind of something?" he asked. Clara glanced toward Nathaniel. Marcus followed her eyes. He looked at the man, then at the folders, then back at Clara, to ask questions in front of him. That alone made Clara grateful. "5 minutes," she said. Marcus put his fork down. They moved the folders to the far corner of the cart's outside counter. Here, the awning kept the papers dry. Nathaniel stood back, arms folded, face drawn tight. Tessa sat inside with her notebook open, turning one page and then another without reading any of it. Marcus opened the first folder. For a while, the only sounds were the soft slap of paper, the low hum of the warmer, and the faint traffic beyond the park. Clara watched his eyes move. She did not understand what he was seeing. She only knew his face lost its dry humor page by page. He asked for a pen. Clara handed him one. He circled nothing. He wrote nothing. He only used the tip to follow lines down a page. Then he opened another folder. Nathaniel looked as if he might be sick. Clara wanted to tell him to sit, but she did not. Some dignity had to be allowed to stand even when it shook. Marcus took off his glasses, wiped them with a napkin, and put them back on. "Who handled the fund reports after they left your office?" he asked. Nathaniel swallowed. "The board finance committee reviewed them." "Names?" Nathaniel hesitated. Clara saw the old fear come up. Not fear of a person exactly, fear of saying a name and making the whole thing real again. "Mr. Brooks," Marcus said, not unkindly, "paper has a way of naming people, whether you do or not." Nathaniel looked down at the folders. Or Price chaired the committee. Marcus nodded once, as if that fit into a space he had already seen, waiting. He pulled one sheet from the stack and set it apart from the others. "What is it?" Clara asked. This did not answer right away. He turned the paper slightly, so the light from the cart fell across it. "This signature," he said, tapping the bottom of the page. "It's his." Nathaniel closed his eyes. "But this transfer," as continued, tapping higher on the page, "shouldn't be under this category. Not if these letters and requests are what they look like." Clara felt the air tighten. "Meaning?" she asked. Marcus looked at Nathaniel, then at her. "Feel." "Meaning, somebody put his name where it made the paperwork look clean." He slid the page across the counter, stopping it under Clara's hand. The signature sat there in dark ink, feel, neat, and familiar from every school form she had ever seen. But above it was a line that did not belong with the letters the folder, a line that made money move away from children who had asked for help. He tapped the page once more. "And this," he said, "is not where that signature should be." The paper stayed under Clara's hand longer than it needed to. Marcus had pushed it toward her, but she did not pick it up at first. She looked at the dark line of Nathaniel's signature, then at the transfer above it, then at the folders spread across the little counter of the food cart. A few minutes ago, those folders had looked tired and ordinary, felt like something with a pulse. They felt like something with a pulse. Nathaniel stood on the other side of the cart window, with his hands at his sides. He had not spoken since Marcus pointed to the page. The color had gone out of his face, in shock exactly, but in the old familiar way of a man watching the same humiliation return by another door. Marcus did not rush him. He had the calm patience of someone who knew numbers did not become clearer just because people panicked around them. He drew one folder closer, opened it, then placed 3 pages side by side. "This one," he said, in the first page with his pen, "is a request for scholarship help. Testing fee, application fee, small amount, nothing unusual." Clara nodded, though she understood only the plain part. "This one," Marcus continued, "views an approval under Mr. Brooks's name." Nathaniel lowered his eyes. "And this one," Marcus said, on moving to the 3rd page, "shows the money leaving the student fund, under a different category altogether." "Different how?" Via asked. Clara asked. Marcus looked at her over his glasses. "Different enough that a person glancing at the summary would think the money still supported students. But it didn't go where the request said it should go." Words settled quietly, but Clara felt their weight. "So it was moved," she said. "Moved, renamed, and made to look clean." Nathaniel closed his eyes. Clara saw the small motion and almost reached toward him, but stopped herself. Pity would not help him stand. Not tonight. The last customer had left before sunset. Tessa had wiped down the inside counter without being asked, then gone still near the warmer, pretending to organize napkins while listening to every word. Outside, the park had emptied into blue evening. The rain from earlier had left the ground dark, and the cart's small light made the folders look yellow at the edges. Has turned another page. "How many of these do you have?" Nathaniel opened his eyes. "I don't know. You don't know? I kept what came through my office. Letters from parents, copies of requests, notes from meetings. Didn't keep them because I thought they were evidence." "Why did you keep them?" Marcus asked. Nathaniel's fingers flexed once. "Because children become numbers very easily," he said. "Paper remembers names if you make it," and spoke for a moment. Tessa looked down. Clara felt the sentence move through her with a strange ache. She thought of the old receipt at home, folded and refolded away, because she had not been able to throw out proof that someone somewhere had seen her daughter as more than a balance. "Do." Marcus pulled another stack toward him. "There's something else." Clara straightened. He sorted through the folders until he found a thin packet held by a faded rubber band. The rubber band snapped when he touched it, and Nathaniel flinched as if the sound had been louder than it was. Marcus unfolded the top page. "Isn't regular scholarships paperwork," he said. Nathaniel did not look at it. "No. What is it?" "A private list." Clara turned to him. Nathaniel's voice stayed low. "Students whose families didn't qualify for formal assistance, but still couldn't pay. Too much income on paper. Not enough money in real life." Marcus studied the page. "You funded this yourself?" Nathaniel's mouth tightened. "Good." Clara held very still. The air in the cart seemed to change. The fryer was off. The food pans were cooling. Somewhere outside, a car door shut in the distance. Ordinary sounds. The space around them no longer felt ordinary. Marcus looked through the packet slowly. "There are initials here," he said. "Notes, dates, amounts." "Do not read the names out loud," Nathaniel said. The end. It was the strongest his voice had sounded all evening. Marcus looked up. Nathaniel stood straighter, shame giving way to something firmer. "Those families trusted me. Whatever they asked for, whatever they couldn't pay, was not meant for a counter in a park." Clara understood then why he had resisted opening the boxes. It was not only his own wound inside them. It was other people's need, preserved in his handwriting. Marcus gave a small nod. "There." He turned the papers just enough for himself to read, shielding the names with one hand. Clara noticed that and felt a quiet respect for him. He could be dry as old toast, but he knew where a line was. The more Marcus read, he frowned, and the more still he became. That worried Clara more than questions would have. Finally, he pulled the first transfer page back beside the private list. "These public fund transfers were not just sloppy," he said. "They were covered with the shape of this private program." Clara's brow tightened. "Meaning what?" "Meaning somebody used the idea of his help program to make other money movements look proper." Marcus tapped the list, the transfer page. Same kind of wording. similar categories. Enough to pass if no one looked at the original requests. Nathaniel sat down on the folding stool outside the cart. Not heavily, carefully, as if even his body did not want to make a scene. They used it, he said. No one asked what he meant. His little mate didn't mercy, the one thing he had tried to protect from committee language and public praise, being turned into a cover. Clara saw it land on him. The accusation had already taken his job, his name, his son's voice on the phone. Now it was reaching back into the quiet good he had done, and staining that too. For the first time that night, anger rose in Clara. Sharp enough to frighten her. She wanted to gather the folders, march to whoever had signed off on the damage, feeding, and lay every page in front of them until they had to look at what they had done. She wanted to say Nathaniel's name in a room where people had whispered it. She wanted somebody to feel the shame they had handed him. Instead, she closed one hand around the edge of the counter and breathed once. Then again, Marcus noticed. "Don't run ahead of the paper," he said quietly. Clara looked at him. "If you make this personal before it's complete, call it personal. Let the document speak first." She hated that he was right. Nathaniel lowered his head. "This is why I didn't want to open it." Clara turned to him. "Because it hurts? Because once people know you helped them, they start asking why you didn't help everyone." The answer was so tired, so painfully practical, that Clara had no reply. Inside the cart, Tessa whispered, "Mom?" Clara looked over. Her daughter was standing, cash box open, but she was not counting. Her eyes were on the private list in Marcus's hand. Clara softened her voice. "It's all right." Tessa did not look convinced. "Is this about the school and him?" "Yes." Tessa looked at Nathaniel, then at her mother. "Is it about us too?" The question hit Clara in a place she had been avoiding all evening. She did not know yet, not for certain. The old receipt seemed to warm in her memory, folded inside a small envelope in the kitchen drawer at home. The zero balance. The line where someone had written paid. The way she had stared at it for so long that first night, fitting at Tet all, after Tessa had fallen asleep, trying to understand how a burden could vanish without anyone asking for thanks. Clara closed the folders carefully. "Marcus," she said, "can you keep looking tomorrow?" "And look tonight," he said. "No, not here." The decision came out firmer than she expected. The cart was too small, the park too open, Nathaniel too exposed. And Tessa was standing inside the circle now, whether Clara wanted it or not. Marcus gathered the pages into careful stacks. "Then take only what matters tonight." "Don't lose the order." Nathaniel looked up. "I know the order, I believe you," Marcus said. "They'll want paper clips." Clara almost smiled despite herself. They packed the folders into two neat piles. Marcus kept a small set of copies to review, and Nathaniel slid the rest back into the canvas bag. His movements were slow. Something had shifted. The shame had not left him. It had simply made room for purpose. When Clara locked the cart later, Tessa stood beside her under the awning, holding her backpack against her chest. "You didn't answer me," he said. Clara pulled the cart's side panel down. "I know. Is it about us?" Clara looked toward Nathaniel, who was waiting near the edge of the path with the canvas bag in his hand. Marcus had already gone, leaving his plate untouched in a paper sack, and the copies under his arm. "I don't know," Clara said, "but I need to check something when we get home." The house was quiet when they arrived. Clara did not turn on every light, only the kitchen light above the table. It made a small circle in the room, just enough for two chairs, a stack of mail, and the old wooden drawer by the wall, where she kept things that had once been too important to throw away. Tessa stood near the table, still wearing her jacket. Nathaniel had come with them only as far as the front step. Clara had asked him in. He had refused gently, saying the papers had given her enough for one night. He stayed outside in the car, with the canvas bag on his lap, while she went in to look. Clara opened the drawer. There were batteries, a sewing kit, old-school photos, a spare key that fit nothing she owned anymore. Beneath all of it, a small envelope worn soft at the corners. She touched it before lifting it. For years, she had kept it without understanding why. Gratitude, maybe. Fear that if she threw it away, the mercy would vanish backward in time. Or maybe because some part of her had always believed a kindness that large had a name, even if she had never been given it. Tessa came closer. Is that it? Clara nodded. He opened the envelope and unfolded the receipt. The paper had creases like thin white scars. Tessa leaned in, reading the old line that had made Clara cry in silence many years before. Paid in full. Clara's throat tightened. She made herself stay steady. She picked up one of the copied pages Marcus had left with her, the private list from Nathaniel's packet. Not the whole thing. Just one page, names shielded, notes partly hidden. Marcus had marked only the entries that needed by impairing. Clara laid the receipt beside it. At first, she saw nothing but lines and numbers and old ink. Then Tessa reached out and pointed. Mom followed her daughter's finger. There, near the bottom of Nathaniel's handwritten page, was a small note in blue ink. Not Tessa's full name, not anything careless, just enough for him to remember. The first initial, the grade, the amount. And beside it, in the same careful handwriting, 2 words. First term. Clara did not move. The kitchen seemed to go silent around her, as if even the refrigerator had stopped humming to let the truth step forward. Tessa's hand covered her mouth. Clara stared at the receipt, then at the line in Nathaniel's book, and all the years between them molded into one breath. The man accused of stealing from children had once paid for hers. Clara, Osamort, did not sleep much after the receipt, and the notebook side by side on her kitchen table. By morning, the feeling in her chest had changed. The shock was still there, but it had hardened into something steadier than a sound. She no longer wanted only to understand what had happened to Nathaniel. She wanted the people who had buried his name under clean paperwork to look at the names he had tried to protect. And came to the cart before lunch, with a folder tucked under one arm, and his glasses already low on his nose. He did not order first. That was how Clara knew it was serious. I went through the copies, he said. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. And Marcus glanced toward Tessa, who was inside the cart with a stack of napkins she had already straightened twice. Then he lowered his voice. It's enough to ask hard questions, enough to burn the building down. I'm not trying to burn anything down. No, Marcus said. You're trying to walk into a room full of people who already decided the story once. Clara looked past him to where Nathaniel stood near the edge of the path, holding his canvas bag with both hands. He had worn a clean shirt and a dark jacket that morning. The effort showed. So did the strain. His face had the look of a man who had agreed to enter a storm because staying outside it had become worse. What do we need? Clara asked. Order, Marcus said. Dates, requests, approvals, transfers. His private list only where it matters. Nathaniel heard that and looked up. Not the names, he said. Marcus nodded. Not the names unless we have to. We don't have to. Clara turned to him gently. Mr. Brooks. No, eyes. His voice did not rise, but it stopped the air around them. Those children came to me because they trusted me. Their parents came because they were embarrassed and tired and trying to keep their children from seeing it. Felt make them part of another public shame. There was fear in him, but not only fear. There was still the old principle in his posture, man who could stand between a child and a room full of adults and not need to explain why. Clara felt her anger soften around that truth. Then we use initials, she said. Amounts, dates, to show what you did, without handing anybody's need to the room. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. He gave one small nod. That afternoon, Clara closed the cart earlier than usual. She hated doing it. The hour lost was money lost, and the bills did not care about justice. But Tessa packed the leftover rice without being asked, and Marcus arranged the papers in a plain folder, each stack clipped in the order he wanted them shown. Just before they left, a woman Clara had seen only in passing appeared near the cart, in a pale coat too clean for the damp path. Eleanor Price did not introduce herself. She did not need to. Nathaniel's body recognized her before Clara did. His shoulders drew in, then straightened, as if habit and hurt had argued inside him, and habit won. Mr. Brooks, Eleanor said. I heard you were gathering old materials. Her voice was smooth, not warm, not cold, the kind of voice that could make a warning sound like concern. Clara stepped halfway between them without thinking. Fear's eyes moved over Clara's apron, then the closed cart, then the folder in Marcus's hand. "I'm sure everyone wants to avoid reopening a painful matter," she said. "For the students' sake. For the school's reputation." Clara had heard people use that word before. Reputation. It often arrived just when truth became inconvenient. Marcus did not speak. Nathaniel looked down at the folder. For one bad second, Clara thought he might hand it over because Eleanor had power over him now, but because old shame knows the sound of the door it came through. Clara kept her voice quiet. "If the matter is painful, then the truth should be the first thing in the room." Fear looked at her then. "And you are?" Someone who read the papers, the polite mask on Eleanor's face held, but only barely. "This is a school matter," she said. "It was a school matter when children's money was moved," Clara answered. "It became a people matter when his name was used to cover it." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Eleanor's gaze shifted to him. "Nathaniel, you know how these meetings work. Things can be handled privately." First name. Something in him flinched. Clara saw it. So did Marcus. Nathaniel opened his eyes. "No," he said. It was one word. It cost him. Eleanor's expression did not break, but the softness left her mouth. "You understand? Wet your mercedon." She walked away before anyone answered. The hallway outside the boardroom smelled faintly of floor polish and old coffee. Clara had not been inside that building in years. She felt it the moment she stepped through the doors. The clean walls, the framed student photos, the quiet way adults lowered their voices in places where decisions were made about children who were not in the room. Nathaniel stopped near a row of chairs. On the far side of the hallway stood Aaron. He wore a pressed shirt and dark slacks, dressed like a man who had come from an office and still wished he were there. Froch. His father, he did not leave either. His hands stayed in his pockets, and his face held the guarded look of someone who wanted the truth, only if it did not ask too much of him. Nathaniel saw him. For a moment, father and son stood in the same hallway and did nothing with the distance between them. Clara looked away first. Some silences did not belong to strangers, even kind ones. Inside the room, Eleanor sat near the center of the long table. Other board members murmured over papers. Marcus took the seat beside Clara and laid the folder in front of him. Nathaniel sat on her other side, hands folded so tightly she could see the tendons stand out. When his name was called, the room changed, not loudly. Nobody gasped, nobody pointed, but eyes lifted, then lowered. Papers shifted. Someone cleared a throat. Yes. It was worse than open accusation. It was the careful discomfort of people who had once accepted a story because accepting it had been easier than asking what it cost. Marcus began with the public records. His voice was plain, almost dry. He did not accuse. He placed one page after another in order. The parent requests, the approvals, the transfer summaries, the categories that looked helpful until the original letters were set beside them. Clara watched Eleanor's fingers tighten around a pen. "These transfers," Marcus said, "were filed under student support language, but they do not match the student support requests attached to them. They were approved under Mr. Brooks' name, but the surrounding paperwork, the money was redirected originally direct after the original approvals." A board member leaned forward. "Are you saying the signatures were forged?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm saying the signatures were used to make later transfers appear proper." "That is different, and in some ways easier to hide." Eleanor spoke before anyone else could. "This is an interpretation. Administrative records are rarely as clean as people outside the process imagine." Clara felt heat rise in her chest, but she held still. Marcus turned one page. "That is why I brought the original requests." He placed a small stack in front of the room. Then he looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel did not move. Clara understood. This was the line. The papers could prove process, but the private list proved the man, and he did not want to buy back his name with someone else's embarrassment. Clara leaned closer, barely speaking. Initials only, his eyes stayed on the table. "For the children," she said. At that, he reached into the folder and took out the list himself. He did not hand it to Marcus. He laid it on the table with his own hand. "These are not for public reading," he said. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. "They are initials, dates, amounts. Families who needed help and did not fit the boxes we had." No one interrupted him. "I used my own money when I could. Not because I was generous. Because I knew the gap. A child can miss a test over a fee. A child can stop trying because a form says no. I kept the notes so I would remember who still needed help." The room had gone very still. Has placed the private list beside the transfer record. Besides, the language from this private support list was later used in fund summaries, he said. But the transfers tied to those summaries did not go to these families. His pen stopped moving. Clara watched the room understand, not all at once, but in small, visible ways. A woman at the far end of the table covered her mouth. A man who had not looked at Nathaniel once finally did, and pushed the page away, as if it had become dirty under his hand. Then Marcus placed one more sheet down. It was the copy of Tessa's receipt, with her name covered except for the first initial. Beside it lay the line from Nathaniel's notebook. Clara had agreed to use it. Tessa had agreed too, though her hands had shaken when she said yes. Not for drama, not for pity, feels own only, because their family could stand as proof without exposing anyone else. "This entry," Marcus said, "matches a payment made for a student whose family was never part of the formal scholarship fund. Mr. Brooks paid it privately, for the same private structure was later used to disguise transfers he did not benefit from and did not initiate." Eleanor's face lost color. Clara did not look at her long. She looked at Nathaniel. He was staring at the paper, with shame now. With grief, yes. With exhaustion, but also with the first fragile sign that the truth had entered the room and not died there. A board member asked Eleanor a question, then another. Her answers grew shorter. The smoothness began to crack. She spoke of procedures, reputation, review processes, the danger of drawing conclusions too quickly. But the more she said, the clearer it became that she was protecting the shape of the old story, the children inside it. Finally, someone asked why the mismatched transfers had not been flagged when Nathaniel was removed. Eleanor opened her mouth. No answer came. That silence did what Clara's anger could not have done. By the time the meeting ended, no one had shouted. No one had slammed a hand on the table. But Eleanor no longer sat like a woman in control of the room. Her position would be reviewed, her role in the finance committee would be suspended. The records would be reopened. The old conclusion against Nathaniel would no longer stand as the clean and final truth people had used to put him away. Outside, air felt cooler than before. Nathaniel walked out slowly, as if he did not yet trust the floor beneath him. Marcus carried the folder, thinner now but heavier in meaning. Clara followed a step behind, her whole body tired from holding steady. Aaron was waiting near the exit. He had heard enough. Clara could tell by his face. The guarded look was gone. In its place was something younger, almost frightened. He looked at his father as if the man before him had become both familiar and impossible to know. Nathaniel stopped when he saw him. For a breath, neither of them moved. Clara stood back, the folder pressed against her side. "Aaron, open his mouth. Then close it again. After all the papers, all the proof, all the words spoken in that room." The son who had stayed away could not find the first sentence. С того дня на станции Дарья долго не могла привыкнуть к тому, что люди смотрят ей в лицо иначе. Не сразу ласково, не сразу тепло. Но уже без той прежней тени, будто за ее спиной всегда стояло что-то недосказанное. Теги ее снова останавливали у дворов, просили соли, муки, полотна. Кто-то говорил сухо, кто-то неловко, кто-то делал вид, что ничего не случилось. Дарья не требовала извинений, ей было важнее другое. Пешки снова принимали при ней, вес проверяли честно, а ее телега опять шла по зимней дороге не как чужая, а как нужная. Степан еще пытался держаться. Первые дни он появлялся возле Трамхуен, говорил с приказчиком, рвал свою кожаную тетрадь, будто бумага могла вернуть ему прежний голос. Но люди уже видели слишком много. Видели мешки, швы, весы, видели, как старик сказал правду, которую носил в себе годами. Приказчик больше не давал Степану пользоваться станционным весом. Возчики стали обходить его стороной. Хозяева из деревень перестали спешить к его обещаниям. Для такого человека это было больнее крика. Он не лишился всего в один день, но главное ушло быстро, ему перестали верить. О Фоме заговорили позже. Не громко, но достаточно. Матрона первая напомнила при людях, что стариков не просто оставили у дороги. Тимофея и Ульяны были заработанные деньги, и часть их зять удержал, прикрывшись лечением больной ноги. Фома пришел на станцию бледный, сердитый, с глазами человека, который больше боялся позора, чем вины. Он пытался объяснять, говорил, что в доме было тесно, что хлеб дорог, что он не со зла. Ульяна слушала, опустив глаза. Тимофей не перебивал. Дарья стояла рядом и думала, как странно. Тем, кого бросили, все еще было больно видеть унижение того, кто бросил. В конце Фома вернул деньги. Не все сразу, часть товаром, часть монетой, часть обещанием под присмотром соседей, но вернул. А главное, уже не мог рассказывать, будто старики сами ушли и сами виноваты. Лова потеряли удобное место, где можно было прятать жестокость под бедностью. Тимофей долго держал в ладони первые монеты. Потом положил их на стол перед Дарьей. «На дрова», — сказал он. «Это ваше, Это когда есть где греться», — ответил старик. Дарья хотела возразить, но Ульяна положила свою узловатую руку поверх ее пальцев. «Не отнимай у него дело, дочка». Он только снова человеком себя почувствовал. Часть денег пошла на дрова. Часть — на муку и крупу. Часть Ульяна спрятала в тряпицу и сказала, что пригодится, когда ребенок попросится на свет. Дарья все еще не знала, что делать дальше. Формально она победила, Рога осталась за ней. Разрешение на развоз было при ней. Степан больше не мог распоряжаться станционным весом. Но победа не ставила сама печь, не чинила крышу, не приносила лишнюю лавку и не делала зиму короче, Элса складом. В углах тянуло холодом. Мешки лежали вдоль стен, бочки занимали место, а ночью ветер все равно находил щели. И все же теперь Дарья смотрела на это место иначе. Однажды утром она вышла во двор, провела ладонью по двери склада и сказала: «Если уж мы здесь не замерзли втроем, может, и другим хватит угла». Тимофей, который в тот момент чинил старые сани, поднял голову. «Кому другим?» Дарья пожала плечами. «Зимой длинная. Старики ходят, возчики застревают. Женщины с узлами идут из деревни в деревню. Не всем нужен дом навсегда. Кому-то нужна ночь у печки». Ульяна долго смотрела на нее, а потом тихо улыбнулась. «Печь надо переложить. Это много ест, мало греет». Так началась работа. Никто не называл это большим делом. Большие дела требуют денег, начальства и громких слов. У Дарьи всего этого не было. У нее были телега, склад, несколько мешков товара, вернувшееся доверие и двое стариков, которые оба не хотели быть только спасенными. Тимофей нашел у знакомого возчика старые доски и выменял их на починку упряжи. Он сделал вдоль стены широкую лавку, вторую, ниже, чтобы Ульяне было удобно садиться. Из обломков ящиков собрал полку для кружек и маленький столик у печи. Работал медленно, часто отдыхал, но каждое утро снова брался за дело. Дарья видела, его спина все еще согнута годами, но уже не стыдом. Ульяна распоряжилась теплом. Она знала, где положить полено, чтобы оно тлело дольше, как закрыть щель тряпицей, как сварить похлебку из малого, чтобы хватило на лишнюю миску. Ее больная нога не стала здоровой, руки не перестали болеть, но теперь никто не говорил ей, что от нее мало пользы. В складе все знали, если Ульяна у печи, человек не уйдет голодным. Матрона прислала старый самовар, почерневший, целый. Сказала, что в ее чайной он только место занимает. Один хозяин привез мешок картошки в счет будущей соли, другой оставил охапку соломы для лежанки. Никто не делал из этого благотворительности. В деревнях так легче. Играть я помогаю, а просто поставить у двери то, что нужно. К концу первой настоящей метели склад стал не красивее, но живее, печь грела ровнее. У двери висел починенный ремень, тот самый, первый, шитый Тимофеем в ночь после их приезда. Дарья не убрала его. Он напоминал ей, что иногда человек начинает возвращаться к себе с малого стежка. Ребенок родился в морозную ночь. Снег тогда шел стеной, дорога исчезла уже к вечеру. Поняла, что до деревни ей не добраться. Страх пришел сразу, острый и холодный. Она не боялась боли так, как боялась остаться в этот час одной. Но одна она уже не была. Ульяна стала рядом так спокойно, видя всю жизнь ждала именно этой ночи. Она нагрела воду, разложила чистые тряпицы, велела Тимофею держать огонь и не путаться под ногами. Старик слушался без единого слова. Его большие руки, когда-то дрожавшие от стыда, теперь уверенно подкладывали поленья, держали самовар, приносили воду. Дарья не помнила потом всей ночи. Помнила только свет печки, Ульянин голос, низкий и ровный, и скрип снега за стеной. Помнила, как в какой-то миг ей показалось, и сил больше нет, а Ульяна наклонилась к ней и сказала: «Дыши, дочка, ты не одна». Утром в складе стало слышно новое дыхание. Мальчик был маленький, красный, сердитый на холодный мир. Я держала его у груди и смотрела так долго, будто боялась моргнуть. Все слова, которые она готовила себе на этот день, исчезли. Не было ни стыда, ни сплетен, ни пустого места рядом. Был ребенок, была печь, и две старые фигуры у двери. Ульяна, вытирающая глаза краем платка, и Тимофей, который смотрел на младенца с такой осторожностью, словно перед ним лежал самый ценный груз на земле. «Ну вот», — сказал он хрипло, — «теперь у нас и начальник появился». Дарья впервые за много недель засмеялась, тихо, устала, сквозь слезы. После родов дорога на время стала делом Тимофея. Он не ездил далеко, сил не хватало, но помогал грузить, следил за упряжью, проверял мешки так внимательно, что ни один возчик не посмел бы рядом схитрить. Дарья возвращалась постепенно. Сначала выходила к телеге на несколько минут, потом садилась у двери с ребенком на руках, снова стала принимать заказы. Люди приходили чаще, не только за товаром. Иногда за кружкой кипятка, иногда переждать метель, иногда просто посидеть у печки, пока лошадь отдохнет. Старый склад незаметно получил новое имя. Он сказал: «Зайду к Дарьиному огню». Другой повторил, третий уже знал дорогу. Первые настоящие постояльцы пришли в конце зимы. Два старика из дальнего села шли к родне и застряли на дороге. У одного промокли лапти, и другой кашлял так, что Дарья без слов открыла дверь шире. Ульяна сняла с крючка запасной платок. Тимофей подвинул лавку ближе к печке. Дарья налила горячей воды и положила на стол хлеб. Не белый, не праздничный. Обычный черный хлеб. Старик взял ломоть двумя руками, и потому, как он опустил голову, Дарья поняла. Иногда человеку важна не еда сама по себе, а то, что ее дают без вопроса, достоин ли он. Степана больше не видели на этой дороге хозяином. И пытался возить товар через другие места, но везде уже спрашивали, чьим весом он пользуется. Слухи в деревнях ходят быстро, особенно когда они правдивы. Его тетрадь больше не открывала двери так легко. Люди стали проверять, переспрашивать, держаться осторожнее. Для него это и было наказанием – остаться при деньгах, но без прежней власти над чужим доверием. Фома приходил один раз. Стоял у порога, не решаясь войти. Ульяна увидела его первой. Лицо ее дрогнуло, но она не отвернулась. Он принес еще немного денег и мешочек крупы. Положил у двери. «Больше пока нет», — сказал он. Тимофей кивнул. «Положи там». Ни проклятий, ни объятий не было. Только ровная черта, которую Фому уже не пустили. Он расплатился не полностью, но достаточно, чтобы перестать прятаться за словами. Ульяна потом долго сидела у печки молча. Дарья не трогала ее. Не всякая боль уходит от справедливости. Также справедливость просто не дает боли стать грязью. Весной склад уже нельзя было назвать складом. Мешки с солью по-прежнему стояли стены, потому что Дарья продолжала возить товар. В печке теперь всегда висел котелок с водой. На полке лежали кружки. Под лавкой охранились сухие рукавицы для тех, кто приходил с дороги. Ульяна завела мешочек с сухарями на всякий случай и сделал крючки для мокрой одежды и маленькую табличку у двери, без вычурности, просто чтобы человек понимал, здесь можно постучать. Дарья часто садилась вечером у огня с ребенком на руках. Снаружи еще тянуло холодом, уже не тем, который загоняет человека в угол. Это был обычный русский холод, с которым можно жить, если есть печь, хлеб и кто-то рядом. Однажды она посмотрела на Тимофея, который чинил чужую уздечку у окна, потом на Ульяну, пересыпавшую сухари в чистый мешок, и поняла. Она больше не думает о них, как о тех, кого подобрала у дороги. Они не были грузом, не были обязанностью. Они стали частью того места, которое выросло вокруг нее, ребенка и старой печи. Вечер в дверь постучали поздно. Молодой возчик привел под руку пожилую женщину, уставшую, с обмороженными пальцами. Он извинялся, говорил, что дальше ехать нельзя, что до деревни не добраться. Дарья открыла дверь шире. «Пойдите», — сказала она. «У печки место есть». Ульяна уже ставила воду. Тиффанчпи поднимался. Ребенок спал в углу, завернутый в теплую ткань. На столе лежал черный хлеб, рядом стояла кружка, и огонь в печке горел ровно. Дарья посмотрела на все это и вдруг ясно поняла, куда пришла ее зимняя дорога. Не к богатству, не к тихой жизни без забот, не к тому, чтобы больше никогда не бояться. Она пришла к месту, где страх уже не был сильнее человеческой руки, протянутой вовремя. За дверью метель снова заметала следы. А в бывшем соляном складе стало тесно от людей, которым, наконец, было куда войти.